Hey guys, you've come to the right place. This channel is all about exciting, entertaining, and engaging videos that will keep you hooked from start to finish. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on anything new.
The envelope was still sitting on the kitchen counter when I got home that Thursday. I'd been the one to put it there, a plain manila envelope, sealed with her name written on the front in my handwriting. It had taken me 3 weeks to get to that point. 3 weeks of sleeping next to a woman I no longer recognized, eating meals at a table I couldn't look at the same way, and going through the motions of a life that had quietly become a lie. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. My name is Scott. I'm 41 years old. I work as a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm in Columbus, Ohio. I coached my son's Little League team for 4 years in a row. I take my coffee black. I still own the first guitar I ever bought at 17, and until 18 months ago, I believed, genuinely, completely believed, that my wife and I had the kind of marriage other people envied. Her name is Nicole. We met at a work conference in Cincinnati when I was 28. She was there representing a logistics company. I was there because my firm sent me as the youngest engineer on the team, and I was trying to prove something. She laughed at something I said at the hotel bar. A real laugh, not polite. And I remember thinking that I wanted to hear that laugh for the rest of my life. We dated for 2 years. Got married on a Saturday in October when the leaves were turning. Bought a house in the suburbs when our son arrived. Mason is 9 now. And 2 years later, our daughter came along. Lily is 7. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. This is not a story I ever wanted to tell. I'm not sharing this because I'm angry anymore. That part burned itself out somewhere in the middle of all of it. I'm sharing this because I wasted 3 years missing signs that were right in front of me. And if someone reads this and it saves them a similar kind of blindness, then something good came out of a very bad chapter. Her boss at the supply chain firm was a man named Victor, late 40s, married, 2 teenage kids in a private school across town. Nicole had worked under him for about 3 years when things started to shift between us. Looking back, the shift happened gradually and then all at once, the way a bridge weakens before it falls. She started staying later at the office. That was the first thing. She'd always been professional, driven, someone who took her career seriously, so I didn't question it. Then there were the weekend calls she took outside, walking to the far end of the backyard, the way she angled her phone screen away from me when a notification came through. Small things. The kind of things you file away but refuse to open. I told myself I was being paranoid. She told me I was being paranoid. So I believed her, and I went back to my blueprints and my Little League schedules and my black coffee in the morning, and I let another 6 months go by. What finally cracked it open was the most ordinary thing in the world. Mason had a stomach bug last spring, called home from school around 11 in the morning, and the nurse tried Nicole first. No answer. Tried the main office number, voicemail. So the call came to me. I wrapped up a site review, told my project lead I'd be back in the afternoon, and drove to the school to pick him up. On the way home, Mason fell asleep in the back seat. I pulled into the driveway, hit the garage door opener, and that's when I saw it. A silver BMW I didn't recognize. Parked in my spot, right next to Nicole's Accord. I sat there for probably 30 seconds, engine running, just staring at it. There's a moment, and I think anyone who has been through something like this knows what I mean, where your brain genuinely fights itself. One half, as you already know. The other half starts generating explanations. A coworker stopped by. Her brother borrowed a car. There's a perfectly reasonable explanation. The reasonable explanation part of my brain lost that fight very quickly. I couldn't bring Mason inside. I couldn't do that to him. Not with whatever was happening in there. And not with a 9-year-old who was half asleep and already feeling awful. I told him there was a problem with the furnace and the technician was still working on it. I told him Grandma would love to see him and we'd get him set up there until I could sort things out. He was too sick to argue. I drove to my mother's house 3 streets over, dropped him off, made up something vague about a scheduling conflict, and drove back. I parked down the block. I didn't go inside. I just sat there. Around 2 in the afternoon, the BMW backed out of my garage and turned down the street. I didn't follow it. I didn't need to. I had already seen enough, and somewhere in the space between the school and that driveway I had quietly decided something. I was not going to blow this up in a rage. I was going to be patient. I was going to be precise. And when it was time, it was going to mean something. That night I came home at my normal time. Nicole was in the kitchen making dinner, smiling, telling me about a deal she'd helped close that afternoon. I asked her if she'd had a productive day. She said yes, a great day actually. I said good, I'm glad to hear it. And I sat down at that kitchen table in the same chair I always sit in, and I ate the dinner she made, and I didn't say a word about what I'd seen. That was the longest meal of my life. The next morning, I called a friend of mine, a guy I've known since college named Grant. Grant does IT security consulting, the kind that involves knowing a lot about surveillance and data capture that most people don't think about. I trusted him completely. I told him what I'd found. He didn't waste time expressing shock, which I appreciated. He asked me what I needed. What I needed, it turned out, was a lot. Over the following week, Grant helped me install 4 small cameras in the main living areas of the house. Nothing invasive, nothing in bathrooms, nothing in the kids' rooms. Living room, kitchen, the main bedroom, and the hallway outside it. They fed wirelessly to a secure folder on my personal laptop, motion-activated, high resolution. He also gave me a voice-activated recorder, the size of a thumb drive, that I placed under the driver's seat of Nicole's car. I want to be honest about the version of myself that did those things. I wasn't proud of it. I felt like I was dismantling something I'd spent 13 years building, one camera mount at a time. But I also understood something that I hadn't fully admitted to myself before that week. The marriage I thought I had was already gone. I was just collecting the documentation. Living with someone you've caught in a deception, while pretending you haven't, is a specific kind of hell. You start noticing everything. The way she checks her phone before she gets out of the car, the way she answers certain calls from the bedroom with the door closed, the way she seems lighter, more energized on certain days of the week. Thursday afternoons in particular. Nicole always said Thursday afternoons were her team's standing meeting day. About 10 days after I set up the equipment, it captured what I needed. I came home from work early, pulled the footage, and sat in my home office with the door closed and went through it. I won't describe the specifics in detail. What I will say is that they used the living room couch first, then the bedroom. I watched maybe 6 minutes of it before I had seen enough. What hit harder than the images was something I heard afterward, on the audio. A conversation after the fact, relaxed, completely casual. She was asking him whether his wife had been suspicious lately. He laughed and said she was too busy with her Pilates classes to notice anything. Then Nicole said something I still think about. She said, "Scott, trust me completely. That's always been the easiest part." I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while. That's always been the easiest part. I went through a lot of different versions of what to do next. Some of them were not productive. None of them involved violence, but a few involved saying things in public that I would have regretted later. I let myself have those thoughts, and then I let them go. What I actually did was this. I called a divorce attorney named Catherine, who came recommended by 2 people I trusted. Met with her on a Tuesday afternoon and walked her through everything. She was calm, direct, and efficient in a way that I found genuinely comforting at a time when very little else was. She told me what I could and couldn't leverage in an Ohio divorce. She told me that even with the footage, we were in a no-fault state, which meant the affair wouldn't dramatically change the financial split. What it could affect, meaningfully, was the custody conversation. That was the part that mattered most to me. Mason and Lily. I made it very clear to Catherine that I was not going to use the videos as a weapon in any public way. I wasn't going to send them to anyone or post them anywhere, but I was going to retain them. And Nicole was going to know I had them. And that knowledge was going to be part of how we negotiated the terms of what came next. Over the following week, I took several concrete steps. I transferred half of our joint savings into a separate account in my name alone. I changed the beneficiaries on my life insurance and 401k to a trust designated for Mason and Lily. I had Catherine prepare the divorce petition and a separate filing against Victor's company for tortious interference, a long shot, but one worth taking. I also did one other thing. Victor was married to a woman named Angela. I didn't know her personally, but I'd met her twice at company functions. A quiet, warm woman who clearly loved her kids and had no idea what her husband was doing on Thursday afternoons. I wrote her a letter. I included 2 photographs, still frames from the footage, cropped carefully so Nicole's face was clear but nothing graphic was visible. I told Angela she deserved to know the truth and that I had additional documentation available if she decided to pursue divorce proceedings. I mailed it on a Wednesday. Friday morning, Catherine's office served Nicole at her workplace. I have to tell you about what happened that afternoon because it still sits with me as one of the stranger days of my life. I had picked up Mason and Lily from school as normal. My mother had agreed to take them for the weekend. They thought it was a grandma trip, one of the spontaneous sleepovers she does a few times a year where she lets them stay up too late and makes too much food. I dropped them off, kissed them both, watched them run inside before she'd even gotten the door fully open. Then I drove home and waited. I'd been home for about 20 minutes when her car pulled into the driveway. She came through the garage door still in her work clothes, and she stopped when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table. The same kitchen table, with my hands folded in front of me and the manila envelope sitting between us. She looked at the envelope. Then she looked at me. "Where are the kids?" she asked. "At my mother's." She sat down slowly across from me, like someone lowering themselves into water they're not sure about. She didn't touch the envelope. "I got served today," she said. "I know. Scott, I'm not going to have a fight," I said. "I'm not interested in fighting. I'm interested in what happens next, and I want to talk about it calmly." She started crying before I finished the sentence. Not dramatic crying. Quiet, steady. The kind that looks like something that had been building for a while. She told me she was sorry. She told me it had started slowly, and then she hadn't known how to stop it. She told me she still loved me. I listened to all of it. I let her finish. Then I slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a printed summary of what the cameras had captured, including timestamps and locations. There were no photographs inside. I didn't want to put images of that in her hands in that moment. But the summary was thorough. She would understand exactly what it documented. "The full footage is on a secured drive," I said. "Catherine has a copy. I have 2 copies. I'm not going to release it to anyone as long as we handle this cooperatively. If it becomes necessary to use it in a custody proceeding, I will. But that's entirely up to you." She didn't speak for a while. She was staring at the summary without reading it, the way people stare at documents when the words won't stay still. "Victor is going to lose everything," she finally said, quietly. I wasn't sure if she was saying it to me or to herself. "I know," I said. "His wife already has a letter." She closed her eyes. "I want to be very specific about what I'm asking for," I told her. "I want joint legal custody, with the kids' primary residence being with me. I want the house with a buyout of your equity over 5 years at fair market value. I'm not trying to destroy you financially. I'm asking you to do the right thing now, because you didn't do the right thing then." She didn't fight it. That surprised me, honestly. I had prepared for a fight. I had prepared for anger and counter threats, and a lengthy legal process that would drain us both. What I got instead was a woman who seemed, more than anything, tired. Tired and ashamed, and not interested in making things worse. She signed the petition 2 weeks later. Victor's ending was messier and came apart faster than I expected. Angela had apparently been considering this for longer than anyone knew. The letter I sent wasn't a revelation so much as a confirmation. She filed within a month, and then, about 6 weeks after Nicole was served, I got a call from a friend of mine who knew someone in Nicole's firm. Victor's partners had called an emergency meeting. The company had a morality clause, apparently not unusual in their industry, and the relationship with Nicole, once it became known, triggered it. Victor was asked to resign. He pushed back and threatened to sue, which the partners apparently found amusing given the documentation in their possession. He was gone within the week. Nicole lost her position too. Though technically it was framed as a mutual agreement to part ways, she found work eventually. Receptionist position at a medical office, a significant step down from where she had been. I don't take pleasure in that. I want to be honest about that. There was a period where I thought I would, and I didn't. The divorce finalized 8 months ago. Mason and Lily live with me. They see their mother every other weekend and one night during the week, which was what she agreed to and what the court confirmed. They know their parents aren't together anymore. They don't know the reason, and I intend to keep it that way for as long as I can. When they're old enough to ask real questions, I'll answer them honestly. For now, the most important thing is that they feel stable, and by most measures, they do. Nicole called me on a Sunday evening about 3 months after everything was finalized. The kids were asleep. She said she wanted me to know that she was sorry, not in the way she'd said it at the kitchen table, which she described as panicked and self-protective, but genuinely. She said she understood if I never forgave her and that she wasn't asking for that. She said she hoped I would be okay. I told her I appreciated the call. I meant it. I have not started dating again. I'm not opposed to it, but there's no particular urgency, and I've learned to be suspicious of urgency in myself. What I have done is start therapy, which, I should have done years earlier and which I recommend without reservation to anyone who has been through something like this or anything adjacent to it. I've gotten better at recognizing the difference between being self-sufficient and being closed off. They look similar from the outside. They feel completely different. Grant came over for dinner a few weeks ago, him and his wife, the kids running around in the backyard while we sat on a porch. At one point, he asked me how I was actually doing. Not in the polite way, but in the way he's been asking since we were 22. I thought about it for a minute. I'm okay, I told him. I'm actually okay. And I meant that too. I'm not going to tell you there's a clean lesson at the end of this. Real life doesn't deliver those on schedule. What I will say is that the thing I'm most grateful for, beyond the kids, beyond the house, beyond any of the practical outcomes, is that I didn't act in a rage. I wanted to. There were days in those 3 weeks when I wanted to walk into her office and detonate everything in front of an audience. I understand why people do that. I understand the appeal of making the scale of the damage visible to everyone at once, but I'm glad I waited. Not because it made me feel powerful. It didn't. Not really. Because it meant that when everything came apart, it came apart on terms I could live with. It meant that when I looked at myself in the mirror the morning after she signed those papers, I didn't have anything to be ashamed of. That's the part nobody tells you going in. The revenge, if you want to call it that, isn't the moment they find out. It's not the look on her face at the kitchen table, or Victor's partner showing him the door, or any of the specific things that felt so important at the time. The real thing, the thing that actually carries you forward, is being able to stand up straight afterward. That, and Mason asking me last week if we could get a dog. We're getting a dog. I've thought a lot about what made the difference between falling apart and coming through this thing with something left to stand on. And honestly, it wasn't strength in the way people usually mean it. It wasn't some clean, decisive moment where I just decided to be okay. It was smaller than that. It was the choice, made over and over again across 3 very long weeks, to not act from the worst part of myself. And that's harder than it sounds. When you're sitting in your car watching a stranger's BMW back out of your own garage, when you're eating dinner across from someone who is lying to your face and calling it love, everything in you wants to blow the whole thing open right there. I understand why people do. I came close more than once, but I kept coming back to the same question: what happens the morning after? What am I left with if I torch everything in one afternoon of rage? What I learned, the hard way and the only way, is that how you respond to being wronged matters just as much as the wrong itself. Not because life is fair and keeps a running tally. It doesn't, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something, but because you have to keep living inside the decisions you make. Scott, the guy who blew everything up in a rage, would have won nothing. He'd have lost his kid's stability, his financial footing, and any moral ground he had to stand on. The version of me that waited, documented, consulted an attorney, and walked into that conversation at the kitchen table prepared. That version got to walk away with his head up. Nicole made choices. They had a cost, not because the universe punished her, but because choices have weight and momentum and they land somewhere eventually. Victor lost his partnership, his marriage, and his professional reputation. Not because I went after him out of spite, but because the thing he was doing was already going to come apart. I just stopped being the person absorbing the damage quietly. There's something about watching people face real consequences for real decisions that clarifies things. I don't mean it satisfies anything deep. It doesn't. But it does make the world legible again in a way that betrayal scrambles. You start to understand that the people who hurt you weren't operating outside of reality. They were just counting on yours being too small to see the whole picture. The thing I'd tell anyone going through something like this is, give yourself permission to be intelligent about your pain. Anger is information. Use it. But don't let it make your decisions for you because it's a terrible strategist. What got me through wasn't hardness. It was patience and preparation, and being willing to sit in an incredibly uncomfortable situation long enough to handle it well. Mason asked me last week if our new dog could sleep in his room. I said yes. He's 9 years old and his world is basically intact, which is the only outcome I actually cared about from the start. That's the thing I come back to when the harder nights hit. Not the legal win, not the outcome with Victor, not any of the parts that felt like justice at the time. Just a kid sleeping with a dog in his room and a house that feels like home. That's what patience was for.